Okay, in this episode, we're going to be in the book of Esther, chapters 3, 4, and 5. Okay, thanks for joining me for another episode of Papa John's Scripture Notes. I hope you're okay after the last episode. Who knew the book of Esther could be applied so much and in so many ways to our day? I began preparing for the book of Esther, Papa John's Scripture Notes episodes, and like I said, it's taken a whole new direction. Where I originally was going to go was focused on how the Jewish scribes over time were kind of driven crazy by the fact that they could not find the divine name for God the Father anywhere in the book of Esther. And so they found very creative ways to manifest the name even though it was not in the script. And I'm still hoping to hear back from Nehemiah Gordon and Linnell, his wife, because years ago I saw an episode where he showed the tricks and the ways they would pull that off. But in the meantime, Michael Rood has taken us down a path, and Michael Rood is, again, how I met Nehemiah, an amazing Bible scholar. And I bet a lot of the questions you've had over your life regarding the way our country or the world at large is on the Gregorian calendar and what is deemed a holiday and what's not in different countries. Who knew that Easter had pagan roots before it was Christianized and attached to the resurrection? And who knew that Esther's name was Easter before Michael Rood, and that it was a very sensual name for the culture she lived in to be given such a name? No one would ever guess she was a Hebrew girl. It's quite interesting how God works. And I'm just going to get right into the story with Michael Rood. We're going to go through these 3 chapters as quick as we can, but we can't go too fast. There's just so much good information. Michael Rood says, and now we move on to chapter 3 because we're going to see the hand of the Almighty. It's prevalent in the book of Hadassah. He's moving things, yet his name does not appear. It's not mentioned within the book of Esther. So we begin with, and he says Easter, chapter 3, verse 1. So I say Hadassah, he says Easter, and Esther, it's all the same person. Verse 1, after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, and Haman's name means the magnificent, the son of Mamidatha. It says in your King James, Michael says it's literally Hamadatha, meaning the doubled. So his father's name means, the root word means the doubled, the son of the doubled, the Agagite. And he advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. Now this is after the time of Daniel the prophet, Michael says. And as Daniel worked primarily under the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II, he also served under other rulers in Babylon. The subsequent empires that that conquered Babylon, including Belshazzar and Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Great. So Daniel plays an incredible role in history. Even though he's in captivity, he's serving the God of Israel. Quite remarkable in these positions of power. But that's years ago. So Michael now is going to bring us to current to this chapter. Now we have Ahasuerus, aka Xerxes, and we have Haman, the root word of his name, the magnificent one, who is an Agagite, and he is the one who is put into this same position previously held by Daniel the prophet. Now we're going to understand why there are all of these boring genealogies throughout the Bible. They're not really boring at all, Michael says. It's just that we have to know enough about Scripture to know how important these genealogies are. And we see that to understand the relationship between Mordecai and Haman and what is about to happen between the Jews and the Agagite, we have to go back to Esther chapter 2, verse 5, which was in the last episode, where it says, in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. Now, it doesn't give us all the generations here. Michael Root's going to help us understand. As a matter of fact, it leaves out like 490 years. But it lets us know that Mordecai goes all the way back to being a son of Kish, which is over 490 years earlier. Kish, a Benjamite. Now, this shows that this is an unbroken lineage, even though it doesn't describe every single generation that is there. So, ladies and gentlemen, Michael says, Mordecai almost is royalty. And as it tells us in 2 Samuel 16, 5 through 8, out of the family of the house of Saul, there came a man whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. Well, this is King Saul's brother. And we see that Mordecai literally comes from Saul's brother, who then has a son named Shimei. And that is the lineage of Mordecai. But he's still within the household of Saul, or King Shaul, King Saul, of the son of Kish. And then Michael Rood says, so now I want to go back to the storyline of Hadassah here to understand this lineage of both Saul, the son of Kish, and this Agagite, Haman. So before we get there, though, we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 1 through 3, where it says, Samuel said unto Saul, thus saith Jehovah of hosts. So the God of armies, this is the God of judgment. So the prophet saying to King Saul, thus saith Jehovah of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid in wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant, suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. And we covered this before, Michael says, when we covered Esther chapter 2 in the last episode. We covered this so we know who the Amalekites are and who they are the offspring of. But additionally, we find in Genesis chapter 36:12, where it says, Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and Timnah bare to Eliphaz Amalek. So Amalek is actually a grandson of Esau. So we're going back to Isaac and Esau. We're going way back to Abraham and Sarah and their handmaid. So Amalek is actually a grandson of Esau, who went forth and dwelt with the cursed Canaanites, who are known for their gross immorality, murdering, and sex perversion. That's what they're known for, Michael says. This is why when we have these Amalekites dwelling with them, nothing good is going to come out of these modern Amalekites either. And so in 1 Samuel 15:7, we're going to continue to read, where it says, so Saul, Shaul, the king, smote the Amalekites from Havilah until you come to Shur. That is over against Mitzim, or that would be Egypt. I wouldn't know that. Thank you, Michael Rood, for that little gem. Verse 8, but he took Agag. Now remember, Michael says that Haman is an Agagite. His father is an Agagite. So in this verse, he says, but he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive. Now God just told him to kill everything and everyone. Verse 9, though, continues, and the best of the sheep. So he kept the king of the Amalekites alive, Agag, and he also kept the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, and the lambs, and all that was good, and he would not utterly destroy them. So Samuel then comes back and to Saul and recorded in 1 Samuel 15:26, at near the end of the verse, this is where Samuel the prophet says, Jehovah has rejected you from being king over Israel. And why is that? Because he did not do what he was told to do. He was told to completely obliterate these people. But the best of the sheep, the best of the oxen, and Agag the king, and it's not just Agag the king, it's also his family that live. They're not destroyed either, because the Agagites are going to continue on, Michael Rood says. So he brought Agag, and it says in verse 27 of 1 Samuel chapter 15, as Samuel turned away to go, Shaul laid hold upon the skirt of his mantle. So the prophet is turning to leave, and the king grabs hold of him. And then Michael explains in the King James New Testament, it reads the hem of his garment. He grabbed the hem of his garment. But in the Hebrew, it reads the skirt of his mantle, which means this is the tzitzit. He's grabbing the tassels. He's grabbing onto the tzitzits on the hem of his garment that are very symbolic. And he tore it. He tore the tzitzit off of the prophet's, the hem of his garment, and ripped it off. So the prophet Samuel said unto him, he turns back and says, Yehovah hath rent the kingdom of Israel from you this day. It's over. And it was over because he had made excuse after excuse, and finally the excuses had ran out. And just as the Almighty said in Exodus 17:16, Jehovah has sworn that he will make war with Amalek from generation to generation. And that's again in Exodus chapter 17. Then Michael says, see, this is why. This is why Shaul was put on the job. You take him out now. I have sworn, this is speaking first person for God, I have sworn that I will make war against them because of what they did. This will not be forgotten. But now they continue to do it. And because Saul refused to take care of business and he saved the best alive, hundreds of years later, here in Babylon, the number one man in the empire under the king is not someone like Daniel, not like Daniel the prophet, but of the offspring of Agag, an Amalekite. And now we're going to see the plot thicken in verse 2. Wow, we are definitely getting past the ink on the page with the help of our Bible scholar Michael Rood. We're only in verse 2 after all of this. So Michael Rood says, verse 2, and all the king's servants that were in the king's gate, they bowed in reverence to Haman. And remember, Haman's, the root meaning of his name is magnificent. So they all bowed in reverence to Haman, for the king had commanded concerning him. And he said that everyone will bow down and respect him. He's my number one man. He's on my right hand. You respect him like you respect me. But the verse ends with, but verse 2 says, but Mordecai. And what's the root word of Mordecai? Little man, the little man. He refused to bow, nor did he give up any respect. Oh, Haman, Michael Root says, he felt a lot like Rodney Dangerfield. He got absolutely no respect from the little man. And if you don't know who Rodney Dangerfield is, perhaps that's okay. That definitely dates Michael Root and Papa John. He was a comedian that always, his punchline was, I get no respect. I get no respect. So verse 3 and 4, Michael Rood continues, then the king's servants, which are in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's commandment? Meaning you're not bowing, right? And now near the end of verse 4, the verse continues, he had told him he was a Jew. And then Michael says, but that's a shorthand for this verse. That's shorthand. He probably said something like, let me tell you a little story about this Agagite, about Haman and about his great granduncle. Let me tell you what happened. And let me tell you what the Amalekites did to us when we were coming out of Egypt. Let me give you the background story. And he told them the whole history. And then finally they understood, but they said, it doesn't really matter. You're not living in the land of Israel anymore, and your king didn't, obviously, King Saul didn't do his job, but right now, this is the man in charge of the empire under Xerxes, under Ahasuerus. But verse 4 begins with, now it came to pass when they spoke daily unto him, that would be Mordecai, and he hearkened not unto them, then they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matter would stand, because Mordecai told them that he was a Jew and gave them the background. Okay, this is not good. It's going to create friction. There's going to be, you can just see it building, right? Verse 5, and when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow nor reverence him, and then Michael Rood says this would be like bowing down and reverencing Yasser Arafat, or Shaikh Ahmed Yassin of Hamas. Shaikh was one of the 4 founding members of Hamas, the terrorist group today that we deal with clear to this day. So he's saying for Mordecai to bow to Haman is like bowing down to these famous terrorists throughout history from the Middle East. These are the murdering followers of Allah, the fictional moon god invented by Muhammad. Michael Rood is true to his namesake. He's not always so polite. He's shooting pretty straight, and he's using a lot of salt and less sugar. I think you would agree. But these are things we should consider as possible. You know, we live in a pampered age, and no one's willing to shoot straight. Very few are willing to shoot straight, but Michael Rood is not that type of man. Verse 6, and he thought evil to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Then Michael Rood says, but when they, who, the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, back to the verse, had shown him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. So Michael Rood continues. He said, I'm not just going to take out Mordecai, I'm going to kill them all, because now he knows these are the people that nearly wiped his people out. Now remember, in this providence, there's 127 providences in the kingdom of Persia, 127 kingdoms that King Ahasuerus rules over. And this is the top of the kingdom and what's left of the Amalekites. And now Haman sitting at the top of the empire of the Persian Empire. So the verse says, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the entire kingdom of Ahasuerus, even all the people of Mordecai. Now, Papa John has a short footnote before we go into verse 7. Originally in Israel, the months never had names. They were referred to sequentially as the first month, the second month, and so on. Some of what is covered next by Michael Rood may seem like it's not important or related at all even to the story of Esther, but it's actually very important, which I hope you'll see by the end of this episode. Understanding more of the original language, history, and calendar context here can offer us increased knowledge so that we can even apply it to our days here at the end time as part of the latter days with the ongoing restoration of all things leading up to the second coming of Jesus Christ, the promised Messiah. So verse 7 here may be very short, but it contains some vital information to help us understand God's calendar and his reckoning of time as it relates to this story found in the book of Esther. So verse 7, in the first month, that is the month of Nisan. And then Michael Rood says, now actually the month is not really named Nisan. Well, it wasn't until right here, right now in this book. Once we were in Babylon, then we picked up the Babylonian names for the months. References to the first month in the ancient Israel can be found in Exodus 13, verse 4, 23:15, 34:18, and Deuteronomy 16:1. So now we're going off to talk about the first month, which this verse just said is the month of Nisan, but it had no name. It was just the first month previously. And Michael Rood's going to make that point. He says, yet Aviv is not the name of the first month. The first month is always referred to as the month of the Aviv. In Hebrew, it's always called Ha-Aviv, Ha as in the. Now, in your King James Version, Michael says, it'll say the month of the Abib. Instead of the V sound, it's the B sound. I don't care how you pronounce it, Michael says. There's no month called Abib or a month called Aviv. No, it's the month of the Aviv. And it begs the question, the Aviv of what? Because Aviv is an ancient Hebrew agricultural term that describes the stage of the maturity of the crop known as barley. It only refers to barley. Barley is harvested in the spring, and when we find out when we find out that when the barley is of Aviv, then that is when we celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. Because during the feast of unleavened bread, we present the first fruits of the barley harvest, and the barley must be Aviv before you can present the first fruits. And that's also why we have occasionally added a 13th month to the year. Why? So in order to allow the barley to mature a month longer if it hasn't reached the state of Aviv yet. So that's why each year we actually do not know when Passover is going to begin until the end of the 12th month, when the first sliver of the new moon appears and the barley is found to be Aviv. Again, Aviv is a specific stage of ripening of the barley. And if the barley is found to be Aviv, then we celebrate Passover that month. If the barley is not yet at the ripening stage of Aviv, then we put it off for a month. So most years total 12 months, but sometimes we add more we add one more month, and that is the month of the Aviv. Month number 1 is uh, anyway. But what that would do then was give the previous year a 13th month year. Now back to verse 7, where it says right here, the month of Nisan, as it was known in Babylon, in the 12th year of the king of King Ahasuerus. So Hadassah had been queen now for 5 years. Just do the math, but Michael Rood has done the math for us. That's kind of surprising to Papa John. I never realized how much time had passed before this crisis came up regarding the threat of everyone being killed who are Jewish. So Hadassah has been queen now for 5 years, and this is the month that they cast pur. That is, they cast lots. So there was a lot that they cast. This is a way of choosing, like rock, paper, scissors. This is a way that some people cast lots, but it says that they cast pur, P-U-R. That is a lot before Haman, the verse says, from day to day, from month to month. To the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. Now let's just take a look at this, Michael says, and let's use the simplest way for deciding something. This is how they start out NFL games, with the simplest possible way of figuring out who's going to kick off and who's going to receive and which direction. They are using a simple coin toss. And if we start right now at the first month of Nisan, like it says here in verse 7, then we can flip a coin, again, which is the simplest method for deciding something. And we flip that coin because we're just looking for heads to come up. We just want heads to come up once, and the decision will be made. And if the first time the heads comes up, boom, well, then that's the month we're going to put our plan in place. And what's this plan? The plan is to exterminate all the Jews. That's what it is. And so it goes up for the first 6 months. So they flip the coin 6 times. The first 6 times they flip the coin, and it never comes up heads. The chances of that happening, Michael Rood says, is 1 in 10.67. And then he continues. And so now every month they flip it and it doesn't come up. They're starting to think, something's wrong with this coin. Now, this is the simplest thing, but understand, if it's doubled, if it's like 2 things that have to come up together at the same time, like a black and white dice, and both of them have to come up at the same time, then the odds significantly multiply exponentially from there. But we're just going to keep it simple, the simplest form, where you're just waiting for the heads of the coin to show up. And we're doing this because it's showing that the hand of the Almighty, whose name is not within the book of Esther, that the hand of the Almighty is working in this very account. So if you ever feel alone, Papa John interjecting here, if you feel like you're alone and you can't find God, just know He's there and He's in the details of your life. I can promise you that. Now, Michael Rood continues, and this is significant because in the whole history of time, we're going to see that there are things in the book of Daniel that are going to be based upon the events of Purim. And it's all back to the days of Haman and this simple coin toss. And so now he finally gets to the 11th month, still waiting for the heads to come up. And the chances of that happening, Michael Rood says, is 1 in 186.2 times. It's showing us that the hand of the Almighty is in here. It's because it's going all the way around the year to the final month. This is going to give the greatest amount of time for all of these things to transpire, which would be a good thing for those on the list to die. Gives you more time to figure out how to stay alive, right? And now we found the month. So they found the month because it came up heads finally. So now they cast lots again to find out the day. And Michael says, I'm giving you just the simplest version of a coin toss, and now it's on the 13th. And so on the 13th, the chances of that is 1 in 620.5 chances. 1 in 620.5. That it wouldn't come up heads until the 13th day. So this is showing the odds of how rare that is for that to happen. But the Almighty is in charge of the coin toss. So let's move on to verse 8. And Haman said unto Ahasuerus, there are a certain people scattered abroad, dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither they keep the king's law. Therefore It's not for the king's profit to suffer from. You know, the guy's just a liar, Michael Root says. The Jews in the land have been nothing but good for the entire empire. And he says, oh, these people, they don't respect the laws. And that's true. Why? Because they live a higher level of the law. And a common sentiment among the founding fathers of the United States, Michael Root says, was we're not basing the future of America upon the Constitution, far from it. We are basing it upon every man's ability to govern himself according to the commandments of God. Because if you govern yourself according to the commandments of God, you are living on a higher level. You don't need to make laws for these people. John Adams wrote in a 1798 address to the military, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Michael Root continues, but now we have 2.4 million laws here in America. Why? Because people simply will not govern themselves according to the Torah of God. No, we've been taught in our schools there is no God. It's a survival of the fittest. If it feels good, do it. Oh, in many ways, we live in the post-Christian America. But now, as we take a look at this, Haman is just lying to the king. Haman is a liar. There is no honor in this magnificent person at all. Not a bit of honor is due him, and that's why Mordecai, the little man, is refusing to even look his way. He won't even spit in his direction if he had to go out of his way. Verse 8 ends with, therefore, Haman says, it's not the king's profit to allow them to continue. Verse 9, if they please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And this is what I'll do. I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasury. Michael Rood then says, typically Washington, D.C., this is very typical. This is a Washington, D.C. payoff. It's a multi-million-dollar payoff, ladies and gentlemen. See, these things are real. He's paying off the king. He's putting so much into the king's coffers. There's so much, it's no different than our day. Verse 11, and then the king's saying, well, this sounds serious. So he takes the ring off his hand, which is the signet ring, and he gave it to Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the doubled, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And then verse 11, and the king said unto Haman, the silver is yours. The people also do with them as it seems good to thee. And then Michael says it's going to take some finances to pull this whole thing off. And the king is saying, okay, all the money that you're given, I'm going to give you charge over it. You make sure that this is done. I believe you're telling me the truth. We need to take care of these Jews. We've got the United Nations. Everything's backing you right now. All 127 provinces are on your side. Then we go to verse 12. And then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month. So this is right at the beginning of the first month or mid-month. And there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants of the governors that were over every province, according to the writing thereof, and every people after their language, in the name of the king Achashverosh it was written, and sealed with the king's ring, because the king's ring was on the finger of who? The magnificent Haman. Now, Papa John highlighted right here in burnt orange the last line of verse 13, where it says, and take the spoil of them for prey. So the letters that they're going to, let's just read the verse with Michael Rood's help. But this is going to come up, not in this episode, but as we wrap up the book of Esther, I want you to realize how different the Jews are as they defend themselves compared to these who are not only going to kill the Jews, but they're going to then steal everything they own. Whereas the Jews are very different, even though they're protecting their lives. Michael Rood says, verse 13, and letters were sent by post to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, to cause to perish all Jews, young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month. And they picked that date by chance. They picked that by rolling the dice or tossing a coin, and God has given them the full year almost to figure to exercise the faith and muster the courage to find a way to be saved. This is really setting up the stage, isn't it? So uh, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is in the month of Adar, and to take the spoils of your prey. So now it's legal plunder. They can do it, and the law supports them in this. And then Michael says, and this is what we see in Europe's vision of this, in Hitler's version of it, even in the Museum of the Extinct Race, which Hitler wanted to create a museum to the extinct race. He had fully intended to pull it off. And then Michael Rood says a great film about out there, the documentary called The Rape of Europa, to see exactly what was done, the absolute murder of millions and millions of Jews, the plundering of everything they had. And this was no different than Haman's plan, even way back then. And Papa John put 2 links in here for you. There's a short link called the Nazi Museum of the Extinct Race, about 15 minutes long. And then there's the full movie, which is, I believe, hour and a half, all available online. But let's continue with this chapter. We're going to wrap up the last verse of chapter 3. Then the copy of the writing for the command was given in every province to be published unto all the people, that they should be ready against that day. So the post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, right there in Babylon. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was in absolute turmoil. Can you imagine? And then we begin chapter 4, verse 1, with Mordecai's reaction to this. And when Mordecai perceived all that was done, he rent his clothes. He put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried out with a loud voice and a bitter cry. And Michael adds, and you could imagine the torment of his soul, because he knows he's responsible. He could have just kept his mouth shut, so to speak, and bowed to Haman like everybody else and pretended that everything was okay. But no, he had to speak up. And now they're not only going to kill him, but they're going to kill every living Jew in the empire, which means in the world there would be no Jews left. This is exactly the position of today's Hamas and Hezbollah, even now, Michael Rood adds. And I'm seeing such an increase of anti-Semitism in the last few years. It's shocking to Papa John. And not that, just like us, the Israelis are not perfect, and neither are we Americans. And I just wonder where this spirit comes from. Well, I shouldn't wonder. It comes from the father of lies. Verse 2, and it came even before, and so Mordecai came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. So Michael Rood explains verse 2. It is illegal to enter the king's gate where Mordecai was allowed to go before because of his position, but it was also illegal to go in clothed in sackcloth and ashes. So Mordecai stayed outside. And the entire empire, wherever the decree went, everyone, all the Jews were in great mourning, very sad, very stressed. They were fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. They had 1 year left before the death sentence would be executed, and there was nothing they could do about it. They were unarmed. They were living in the civilian population within of the empire of Babylon. Verse 4. So Easter's maids, Michael, he keeps calling her Easter, Esther, Hadassah. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her. They told her the situation with Mordecai. He's out there. Your cousin is out there in sackcloth and ashes outside the king's gate. The verse says, then the queen was exceedingly grieved. This does not look good politically. And she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, to take it away from him, but he received them not. Verse 5, then Esther called Hatach, which means truth. His name means truth, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was, what's going on here. Verse 6, 7, and 8. So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened unto him, and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasurers to destroy the Jews. And also Mordecai gave Hatach a copy of the writings of the decree that was given to Shushan to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to declare to her and charge her that she should go unto the king to make supplication unto him and request before him for all her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. And again, Esther spoke unto Hathach and gave commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants of the people, the province, everybody knows, and whoever, whether man or woman, should come into the king, into the inner court, who is not called, there is just one law. So these verses are describing you can't approach the king, even she is the queen. You have to wait to be called. Because if you approach the king, you could be put to death. So they're just helping us get context of the laws of this empire in Babylon. So except to whom the king shall hold forth the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come unto the king these 30 days, Esther says. Well, Hadassah, Michael Root says, has now been queen for 5 years. Again, that surprises Papa John. This is a little detail I've overlooked my entire life. And then Michael says she may be a little past her prime. That's doubtful. But then but the point is, he has perhaps thousands of concubines, and so she knows that she's not been on the list for at least 30 days. That's Michael Root's point. And so that's in the back of her mind possibly as well. Now we're going to go with verses 12, 13, and 14. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded, okay, you tell my cousin this. Do not think that you will escape because you're in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if you hold your peace at this time, there shall be an enlargement. There shall be a greatness, and deliverance shall rise to the Jews from some other place. So now Mordecai is alluding to the fact you're not safe either, Esther. And if you don't step up, deliverance, God will provide it from some other place through the Jews. That's pretty powerful declaration of faith from Mordecai. Even in his sackcloth and ashes, that's a powerful declaration of faith. Deliverance arise to the Jews from some other place. But you and your father's house will be destroyed. And who knows whether you have come unto the kingdom for such a time as this. That is such a famous phrase. Michael Root says, perhaps everything that has happened to you in your whole life, your parents being killed, me raising you, and me helping you, and you getting into the king's house, and now that you are the queen, how do you know that maybe all of this happened? Even the fact that Vashti refused to come before the king and all this stuff, maybe the whole fabric of your life wasn't so that was just so this moment was designed. It's as if the Almighty is behind all of this, that this would happen to you, that you would be in the king's palace. And then Michael Root quotes that portion of the verse again, for such a time as this. Do you think we have any important moments in time that perhaps our life has a purpose beyond just the mundane pursuits of pleasure? He who dies with the most toys win type of attitude. I love how the scriptures help us reflect upon ourselves. Now, chapter 4 ends with, then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. So she responds to his declaration of faith in this way. Go, gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat and do not drink for 3 days, night or day. And I also, my maidens, will fast likewise. And so will I go unto the king, which is against the law. She shouldn't do that, right? And if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. Wow. Esther is an amazing woman of faith. She knows who she is and she knows who God is. And she has got everyone she can think of praying and fasting, even her maids. Pretty cool. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther or Easter or aka Hadassah had commanded him. And now we're in the last chapter for this episode, Esther chapter 5. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said unto her, and Michael Root says, and I'm sure she was like, what a sigh of relief. This This is after 3 days of no eating and no drinking. Her life is on the line. And he said, "Come, dear." Then the king said, "What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is your request? It shall be given unto thee even to the half of the kingdom." And Michael Rood then adds, and she said, "Well, that sounds like a pretty good divorce settlement. That's like 63.5 empires or kingdoms. I'll take that." And Michael Rood's sense of humor, he's like, "No, it's a figure of speech. It's being magnum. When I do these episodes, my tongue gets tied. Magnanimous. He's being very gracious, magnanimous. I can't say it. It's an offer of royalty, even to the half of my kingdom. Do you think he really would give up half of his kingdom if she said, yes, I'll take that? No, there's no way on God's green earth, Michael Rood says. This is just royal fluff. So again, then said the king unto her, what wilt thou unto half of my kingdom? And Esther's answer is in verse 4. If it seem good to the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. And the king said, cause Haman to make haste that he may do as Esther has said. And then Michael Rood says, he said, yes, dear, we'll be at your banquet. And the verse ends with, so the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Just the two of them, Michael adds. Now, what does she know? We don't know what she knows because she's been praying and fasting, but we know that we're going to watch a divine revelation unfold right here. Do you want to know how to walk by the Spirit? Michael Rood says, then read the book of Esther. Read the book of Esther. Verse 6, and the king said unto Esther at the wine and cheese party, Michael Rood says, well, it says banquet of wine. What is your petition? It will be granted thee. What is your request, even to half of my kingdom, and it shall be performed. Anything you want, sweetheart, it's yours. Just ask, just say the word. Here's a blank check. Just fill it out. I'll sign it. No problem. What do you want? And verse 7 and 8, then Esther answered and said, my petition and request is, if I have found favor in your sight, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. See, Michael Root says, this is what Shaul in the Brit Hadashah said. In the New Testament, Brit Hadashah is Hebrew for New Testament. In 1 Corinthians, this is where Shaul refers to the word of knowledge and the word of wisdom. These are two of the manifestations of the Spirit that we learn about in the New Testament. See, when the Spirit gives information whereby you could not know by the normal senses in this realm, but you can know it through the Spirit, this is what we put into the category of revelation. Divine revelation, a word of knowledge. But see, she doesn't tell the king what the revelation is. See, she gets the revelation, and this is the word of knowledge. It's a word. It's an instruction telling her this is what you do. And the word of wisdom follows the word of knowledge. And that the word of wisdom is how to carry it out. She doesn't tell the king. She tells nobody. It's information for her and for her alone to act on. It's a personal revelation. And if she does it right, then we're going to see the results. That is beautiful knowledge. This is clarity of scriptural understanding few possess. Thank you, Michael Rood. And I have a son whose patriarchal blessing uses that phraseology, that scriptural type of word of knowledge, word of wisdom. He will benefit greatly with the added insights Michael Rood is sharing with us right here. Verse 9, then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. Michael adds, and he has just been invited. Haman just been invited. It's only the emperor and only him. And it's like he walks out and he's on top of his game. He's on top of the world and he walks out. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I have a wonderful feeling. Everything's going my way. But then there's Mordecai. Mordecai, right there by the gate of the city. This dupe, this disrespectful jerk, this short little man who gives me no respect. Haman can't stand this man. And as soon as he walks out, he sees Mordecai at the king's gate, and he doesn't stand up. He didn't move for him. And now Haman is full of indignation. And I hope you appreciate Papa John's best impression of Michael Rood that I've ever done. No, I can't even come close. That man is so funny. Verse 11, nevertheless, or 10 and 11, he restrained himself. Haman restrains himself. He wanted to strike out. He wanted to take out his scimitar and strike Mordecai right down right then and there. But no, he's holding back. He's got a plan. It's going to take a year, but it's going to work. And when he came home, he called for his friends, and he called Zeresh, his wife. Zeresh is Persian for Goldie. So Michael Rood says, from now on, we're just going to call her Goldie, okay? So he called his friends, and he called Goldie, and Haman told them of the glory of his riches. After all, his name means magnificent, right? And that's why my name is the Magnificent One. I am Haman the Magnificent. Everybody bows to me. I'm on top. I'm top. I'm number one in the entire kingdom, besides the king. Look at all my children and all the things that the king has promoted me up to do. He showed him his ribbons, his badges, his notoriety, his honor that he had received, and shows them that he had just been advanced above all the princes and the servants of the king. So his riches are full. He's full of himself, and he's feeling like my plan, I can't fail, right? Michael Rood continues with verse 12. Yes, even Esther, the queen, Haman said, yes, even Esther, the queen, let no man come in with the king under the banquet except me, myself. There is nobody greater. I am the greatest, the king and I. And tomorrow I'm invited also unto her with the king, and no one else is coming. So now we're going to learn some very terrible things about what it means. This is very different than the crucifixions of Jerusalem of the Roman Empire. What we're looking at here are images of what it means to be on a gallows in the Persian Empire. So, Michael Rood reads the verses right here. Yet all this avails me nothing. So Haman's going from celebrating to now he's complaining about this Mordecai. Yet all that I've accomplished avails me nothing as long as I see Mordecai, this Jew, sitting in the king's gate. Then said Goldie, his wife, and all his friends, well, let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Now, when reading this, Michael Rood says, first of all, the first thing you have to do is get past the word gallows out of your mind in the context of where there's a 13-knotted hangman's noose from the Wild Wild West, which is positioned on this beam with a trapdoor, and that this whole apparatus is 50 foot high, and that Haman is going to be hung. Haman's going to hang Mordecai with a rope around his neck. No, Michael Rood's going to explain. See, the word gallows here in the Hebrew is simply the word wood. He caused the wood to be made, a wood 50 feet high. Now let's get back to Genesis for just a moment for context. Genesis 40, verse 22, it says that Pharaoh hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted them. Remember, Joseph sold into Egypt, now in prison, and then the baker and the candlestick maker and all that whole story, the baker and the butler. So in that verse, he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted. But that was more along the lines of the images that I just showed you. Remember, when Joseph was in prison, there was a butler and a baker, Michael Rood says. And the butler, the one that gave the wine into the king's hand, was restored to his position. But the baker, Joseph said that in 3 days you're going to be hanged. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean hung with a hangman's noose. No, hanging in Egypt, and this was part of Egypt at the time. This is much, much later. But remember, from Ethiopia to the Indus River, all the way to Greece, this is what they did. They had wood that was sharpened, and they hung people on it, this sharpened wood that came up to a slender point. And there, the people, they would be hung on it. Now, how were they hung? Well, let's continue. Let's look at Joshua 10, verse 26, where we read, Joshua smote them and slew them, and then hanged them on 5 trees that were all, and they were hanging upon trees until the evening. Now, the word there, trees, as soon as you see this in your mind, you have a picture of a regular tree, but it's the word ets, E-T-S, or Strong Concordance number 6086. So just look up in Strong's, which is, then he's going to be critical of Strong's Concordance. I love Strong's Concordance, but with Michael Rood's help, I realize it's just adolescent kindergarten type information when you really get to know the scriptures as the scholars do. So he goes, just look up the Strong's Concordance, which really one of the most simple, even elementary. It's not even a high school level concordance. A Strong's Concordance is an elementary school type concordance. It's among the simplest concordances that you can get, and even there it says tree, wood, timber, stock, plank, stalk, stick, gallows. And when the word gallows comes up, it is referring to an impaling stick. They killed these people and then hung their bodies on these impaling sticks for all to see. In Ezra chapter 6, verse 11, which we just went through recently, it says, I have made a decree that whosoever shall alter this word, let timber be pulled down from his house, and being set up, then let them be hanged thereon, and let his house be a dunghill for this very thing. Michael Rood says, and again, whoever alters this word, the verse says, let timber be pulled down from their house, and then let them be hanged on it. How do they hang people on a timber pulled down from their house? You build a gallows, or more properly spoken, an impaling stake, and you impale these people on the stake and then let their house be a dunghill. And what do? Well, all the openings of the house, they are closed up. But the second story of the house, they open it up, and then they burrow down and make a hole from the second story floor down to the bottom floor, and using a beam from the very house, they literally designate this as the dunghill for the village. It is now the newest public latrine. This is what they would have done to their house if this is what you were. So, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Rood says, this is the ultimate disgrace for your family. It pretty much means your family's been completely destroyed, and everybody's memory of you, hopefully, has been destroyed. Now we understand that this. Now we understand. So now we understand what makes a house a dunghill. But now to understand this impaling, we need to pause. Michael Rood says, because for the timber to be then set up onto an impaling stake, here in Mordecai's story, 50 feet high, it is Herodias who said that Darius, the father of Xerxes, hung over 3,000 Babylonians when he took the city. What that means is he impaled them. He didn't hang them with a hangman's noose. It says that he impaled them. Now, how is this generally done? Well, if you really want to exhibit some excruciating pain, you don't impale the people first. First of all, you arrest them. This was the plan for Mordecai. Then you tie his hands behind his back, tie Mordecai's hands behind his back, and then upon the scaffolding, they would then go up and they would seat Mordecai, or this person, any person that's going to be hung, impaled. They would seat him on the sharpened, impaled stake, seat him on the needle point of the impaling stake that then gets bigger and bigger, wider and wider as it expands out. Even if his hands were not tied, a man sitting on an impaling stake would be in such excruciating pain for hours, and it doesn't matter how strong you are, you're not able to reach down underneath yourself and try to pull yourself off this impaling stake. 50 feet high, where everyone sees you, this is an example of the whole world. This is what happens to the enemies of Haman at 50 cubits. So the 50 cubits actually, Michael Rood makes the point is actually, it's like a 75-foot tall. This is twice as tall as a telephone pole. So imagine a city street telephone pole sharpened to a needle point and then finally broadening out to about 5 feet down at the base. You would hope to die in the first 5 or 6 hours, but every time you moved, every muscle twitch, every time you relaxed, no matter what you did, the sharp point would go deeper and deeper and deeper. And if it missed your heart, then it would take out one of your lungs and then up into your throat and finally your brains. Wow. Man, you want to put that gallows where? Ladies and gentlemen, give me a 13 knotted point or a 13 knotted hangman's noose from the wild, wild west any day. Do not let me die on the gallows of Haman. Well, this brings us to the British English Bible facts. So, but now we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 31, verse 3, because this gives us an idea of what it means when it says that these people would be hanged. Joshua hung them on these trees, on these impaling stakes. That let timber be brought, let the house be assembled, take the roof off, dissembled, and then take the roof off. Make this a public latrine, and then the roof timbers sharpen them, and then impale these people on them if they break the Torah. Wow, that was Joshua the prophet. Right? Michael Root says he's getting a little serious, but now in Ezra, these people have got to get back in line. So Ezra says in 1 Samuel 31:3, the battle went sore against Saul, King Saul, Shaul, and the archers hit him, and he was gravely wounded by the archers. Well, what is this sore wounded? Well, to be sorely wounded means gravely. He was wounded unto death. Verse 4, Then said Saul unto his armor bearer, Draw your sword, thrust through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was deathly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And that is when Saul hanged himself. He hung himself on his own sword. In verse 5 it continues, And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he likewise fell upon his sword and died. Verse 6, So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men that same day. They all died together, Michael Rood says. But if we go to the New Testament book of Acts chapter 10, verse 39, we read, And we are all witnesses of these things which he, Yeshua, he, Christ, did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. So they're describing Christ as being hung on a tree. So now the question is, Michael Root's just helping us understand. Sometimes we get it wrong because we're just assuming it's consistent throughout the scriptures. So now we come into the Roman times, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Root says they slew him, Christ, they hung him on a tree, and this tree is called a zulon, in your Strong's Concordance, number 3586. But wood, that word means wood, that which was made from wood, or a beam from which it was suspended, or a cross. Now we know that Yeshua, or Christ, was hanged on a tree. Well, was he impaled on a gallows like we're reading and studying about here? No, because we're now in the Roman times. They don't impale people, they hang them on crosses. And then Michael says, let's quickly go to John chapter 19, verse 31. Therefore, the Jews, because it was a preparation, so the bodies could not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day. We're talking about the body of Christ. For that Sabbath was a high day, they besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and they might be taken away. Why? Michael Rood asks. Because it was the preparation. The preparation for what? Well, it's the preparation of the Passover. And this is what it tells us in the same chapter of John, verse 14. It was a preparation of the Passover about the 6th hour. Pilate said unto the Jews, Behold your king. So it's the preparation of the Passover. And now this word cross in Greek is staros. And according to Strong's, number 4716, it is an upright stake, especially a pointed one. It could be an impaling stake. But again, was Yeshua impaled on a stake? It just gave us a description of it. He was nailed to the staros, a cross. Why would they use the word staros, which could also be a cross? Because that is what the Romans did. They worshipped Mithras. The sign of Mithras was the Babylonian T, the Ta, the T spelled T-A-U, for the cross of Mithra, or the cross of Tammuz. Tammuz, the Babylonian Ta, a well-known instrument of most cruel and ignominious punishment, borrowed by the Greeks and the Romans from the Phoenicians. And among the Romans down to the time of Constantine, the guiltiest criminals, particularly the slaves, were killed in this way. This is Strong's description here. So we see that one place says he was hanged on a tree. And so was it a growing tree, as Jesus was actually on a growing tree? That's one usage of it. True, but we've got to look at the culture, people, and the context. Josephus said at one time they had 2,000 Jewish men in chains waiting for the next crossbeam to become available, because it took up to a week to die on the cross. And so now this person dies and they hang the next one who's been waiting a week for his turn. They knew what a cross was. We can't turn it into a tree and take it out of context. You can't turn it into a gallows either at this particular point. And so now when we read in Matthew 27:5, Judas, what did he do when he felt bad for what he had done? Matthew 27:5, Judas cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. Now, what does this mean? Does it mean that he built a gallows like really fast, like the old Wild Wild West? And then he got a 13-knotted hangman's noose and hanged himself? No, we've got to keep it in context with the culture, the language. And so in Acts chapter 1, 18 to 19, Peter, in Greek, Kepha, Peter gives us the details. Judas purchased a field with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it became known in all Jerusalem as a gross hamatos, an alkadama, or the field of blood. It was a bloody, gory mess. Now, how could that happen if he was hung by an Old West 13-knotted hangman's noose? It wouldn't. How did he hang himself? He took his sword, he put the hilt on the ground just like King Saul did, and he hung himself on his sword. He impaled himself on his sword. Remember the night of the Last Supper, Yeshua asked his disciples if they were lacked anything during this time, and that he set them up in the ministry. And they said no. And he said, okay, I'm telling you, if you got a coat, an extra coat, go sell it. If you got money, go out and buy yourself a sword. Go and do. And of course, it wasn't the Last Supper. It wasn't the Passover meal, like so many believe. He just sent his disciples to go out and buy swords or to sell something at the local market, at the local Aaron's Park and Pond, and buy and buy a sword. And Peter says, well, we've got 2 swords here already. Judas may have been one of them. And they said, that's enough. We're not trying to take over the world here. 2 swords is enough. But Judas took his sword and impaled himself on it, and all of his bowels gushed out. And it was well known in Jerusalem that this place was known from then on as the field of blood. See, ladies and gentlemen, the words in your English version of the Bible had to be interpreted in the light of their biblical usage, not just at the time of the translation, but in their historical usage as well. All these things must be understood in order for us to get the proper context. And now, right here in the book of Esther, the book of Easter, Hadassah, we see in ancient Persia under the reign of King Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes, that Haman, an Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, from the moment we've walked out of Egypt, these murderers, the Agagites, are now trying to murder us again and to wipe us all out. And the first one that he's got that has to go is Mordecai. And he's not going to be satisfied until a 75-foot tower with a pointed beam. And he has Mordecai the Jew seated upon it with that gallows protruding up inch by inch, hour by hour. And now we're going to find out if one of the most powerful, one of the wealthiest men in the world, one who has the signet ring, can make anything happen. He can do anything and make it happen in the Novus Ordo Sorum of the New World Order of Xerxes. He's going to have it his way, and he's going to have it out with this little Jew. And that sets us up for the next episode. And I'm sorry, but I can't close this without take a breath. Papa John's been reading Fast and Furious. There's so much information swirling around by now in your brain. Don't try to remember it all. Allow the dust to settle within your mind and in your heart. As you're pushing the boundaries of your understanding, I hope you do so with questions, because questions lead to answers, and answers help us find the truth. And I just want you to be aware that the scriptures, the way we inherit them from our fathers, and through the lens of Christianity that came out of Judaism, we've come so far from their original history, language, and context. I pray that my children, my children's children, my future posterity, extended family today, and friends, that you benefit and your faith is increased as you realize that there may be things that I don't know, but I know that God knows me. And I love God, and He loves me. I hope you know that. And behind everything that you're learning, don't stress. Allow God, allow the Lord to guide you in how to put into action. Because when we come in possession of truth, the question is, what do you do when truth once you have it? There's a sense of the change of responsibility. Do we just ignore it and go back to the way we lived before and think of God and the ways that we think of God and not even take seriously the things that help us come to know His real, true character, attributes, His powers, and the plan that He's laid out for all of us? I could ramble on, but we're out of time already. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I look forward, hopefully, in the next episode, maybe two, we'll wrap up the book of Esther, which can be applied in ways I never realized to our day and our time. May the Lord bless you between now and the next episode. I love each of you, and I look forward to talking to you again very soon.